Have you ever stopped to think why, even after so much effort, your prayers seem to go unanswered? And what about that feeling that everything is on hold with no change in sight? That's frustrating, isn't it? But what if I told you that this delay has a greater purpose than you imagine? That perhaps what you are interpreting as silence is, in fact, God preparing something great for you. Trusting in God is not just believing that He can. It is trusting that He knows exactly when and how to act. Imagine being able to live without that constant weight of doubt, without the fear of what is to come. Sound impossible? It is not. In this video, you will discover how to transform this period of waiting into one of the greatest opportunities for growth and wisdom in your life. God's waiting room is that moment when life seems to be on hold. You pray, you seek, but the answers don't come in the time you expected. This waiting is a true test of patience, where faith and trust in God are put to the test. It's like being in a line that never moves, and all you can do is trust that eventually your turn will come. During this wait, many give up or despair. But those who remain steadfast learn to depend more on God, recognizing that His timing is perfect. In this process, the opportunity arises to cultivate patience. Impatience, after all, is natural in a world that demands quick answers, but in God's waiting room, we must learn to deal with silence, believing that He is listening, even if the answers have not yet arrived. In this space, God teaches us to live by faith, not by what we see or feel. Faith is often strengthened precisely in these moments of silence and waiting. A practical example would be to use this time to reflect and pray, seeking more wisdom from texts such as the book of Proverbs or Psalms. Waiting can be disconcerting, especially when we see others around us moving forward while we are standing still. But in this time of pause, there's a valuable lesson. It is not just about getting what we want, but about becoming who God wants us to be. With each day of waiting, He is shaping our faith, patience, and hope, preparing us for something greater. And it is precisely at this point that the difference between a no and a not yet begins to make sense, paving the way for the next lesson about God's perfect timing. Oftentimes, when we wait for something that seems to be taking a long time, we tend to think that God has said no. But what many people don't realize is that God's delay doesn't necessarily mean a negative. In fact, He is saying not yet. It's like when we plant a seed and wait anxiously for the harvest. The time between planting and harvesting may seem like an eternity, but God knows exactly when that seed will be ready to bloom. His timing is perfect, even when we don't understand it. This difference between no and not yet is what often keeps us from losing faith. In times of waiting, what we need most is trust in God and His wisdom. Imagine that you are about to leave your house and it starts to rain. Sometimes God holds us back because He knows that if we were to leave at that moment, we might encounter a storm. So the delay is not a punishment, but a protection, a way of preparing us for what is to come. During this time, God is adjusting circumstances and, more importantly, adjusting us for future blessings. Rather than despairing during this delay, we need to cultivate faith that God has not forgotten us. He is attentive to every detail, and what may seem like a delay is actually the perfect time of preparation. God's promises never fail, but they also don't always follow our timetable. When we learn to accept that God's not yet is part of His plan, we begin to see the delay with new eyes, prepared for the growth He will accomplish in us. When we are in God's waiting room, it is easy to focus only on what we are waiting for, but there is something deeper going on. This period of waiting is not passive. It is an opportunity for personal growth. God is working on our character, honing our faith, and developing our patience. Think of a tree that, before it grows outward, strengthens its roots. This is what God does with us during this time. He prepares us, molds us, so that we can sustain the blessings that will come. Often, the most valuable lessons come in these moments of silence and apparent inactivity. It is like an athlete who prepares before a big competition. He spends hours, days, and even months training, even though he does not see immediate results. In the same way, God uses waiting to train us. Perhaps He is teaching us wisdom to handle future responsibilities, or cultivating the faith necessary to face greater challenges. Rather than resisting the process, we need to embrace it, knowing that God has a purpose in every moment of apparent delay. In this process of waiting, every step we take matters. We can use this time to reflect, learn, and grow spiritually stronger. Reading faith-building books like The Shack or God's Directed Purpose can be a way to nourish our souls while we wait. Additionally, practicing daily prayer and meditation can help align our hearts with God's plans. Each day of waiting makes us stronger and more prepared for the blessings He already has in store for us. In the Bible, we find numerous examples of men and women who endured long periods of waiting before seeing God's promises come to fruition. Noah, for example, waited for decades while he built the ark, following God's instructions, even though he saw no sign of rain. Noah's trust was challenged, but he remained steadfast. This example shows us that during waiting, we need to have faith that God's plan is in motion, even when we cannot see the end. Abraham is another powerful example. He was promised that he would be the father of a great nation, but he had to wait many years for the birth of his son Isaac. This time of waiting was a test of his faith and trust in God's perfect timing. Like Abraham, we need to learn to trust, knowing that God never fails to fulfill His promises, even when His timing is different from ours. These biblical examples help us understand that waiting is an integral part of the spiritual journey. And of course, even Jesus Christ went through a period of waiting. He began His ministry at the age of 30, despite being the Son of God. Before that, He lived an ordinary life, in silence, waiting for the right moment to begin His mission. This teaches us that even in moments of apparent stillness, God is preparing us for something greater. So, if even Jesus had to wait for the right time, who are we to rush God's process in our lives? Trusting in God's timing is one of the greatest tests of faith we face. When we are waiting, it is easy to despair, but that is precisely when we are called to trust. When everything seems uncertain and answers do not come, we need to remember that God sees the whole picture, while we only see part of it. Faith involves believing that He is working behind the scenes, even if we cannot see it. Trusting in God's timing means understanding that He is never late or early. He acts exactly at the right time. During waiting, negative emotions can easily arise. Anxiety, doubt, and even frustration try to dominate us. It is in these moments that we must redouble our trust in God, knowing that He has a perfect plan. A good way to combat these emotions is to invest in practices that nourish faith, such as reading verses about hope and trust, or even studying biblical stories that show God's faithfulness. In this way, we can transform anxiety into an opportunity to strengthen our trust in Him. Finally, trusting in God's timing means understanding that every detail is under His control. He knows exactly when doors should open and when we need to be molded. Instead of focusing on circumstances, we should focus our strength on living each day with wisdom and faith, knowing that, in due time, what God has promised will be fulfilled. After all, this waiting is not in vain. It is an opportunity to grow, learn, and strengthen our trust in Him. Now that you understand the importance of trusting in God's timing, the question remains, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you continue to be anxious, trying to rush His plans, or will you allow yourself to grow, learn, and trust? Waiting is never easy, but the greatest blessings come to those who know how to wait with wisdom and faith. So, how will you apply this trust in your daily life? How about starting today, placing your concerns in God's hands and letting Him act in His own time? Don't let this opportunity pass you by. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue learning more about how to live a life of trust and hope. God has great things for you, and I'm here to help you on this journey.